The Spy Who Came In From the Cold is a 1965 espionage thriller starring Richard Burton, directed by Martin Ray, based on a John le Carré novel of the same name. We're going to get into, is it one of the better espionage thrillers of this time period? All this and more this week on the Golden Hour Film Podcast. Hello everyone, welcome to episode 41 of the Golden Hour Film Podcast. A bit of a change of pace this week. I think the only previous espionage thriller we may have covered would probably be Saboteur and or Foreign Correspondent, if you kind of consider either of those espionage thrillers, but obviously there's a lot of Hitchcock elements in there too. This is probably the first straight down the middle Cold War era espionage thriller like that we've done on the podcast. So a bit of a change of pace, like I said. I've seen the film before and I really loved it. We'll get into what I think of it the second time around, but coming on to someone who hasn't seen it, this was his first time watching it. What do you think, Harry? What was your thoughts on the film this time around?
Yeah, hello everyone. I've never seen this film before, and basically anything I had going into it was what Shane had said on the podcast last week, that it's maybe a little more methodical than the average spy thriller, which is interesting because obviously at the time James Bond was all the rave, with the goofy side chicks and side
Gadgets,
quests
yeah.
and henchmen and gadgets and all that. So this was a supposedly very refreshing film for the time because of how bleak and slow and methodical, as Michael Cole would say, this film is. But yeah, I did enjoy it. I have some gripes with the film, but overall I have to say it's like it's a great sandwich if you love bread, because the start and the end are both class. What happens in the middle is maybe not the treat. The treat is the beginning and the end. So yeah, if you're like a real bready sandwich, this is the kind of the film for you, so to speak. Because yeah, killer opening, fantastic ending, and yeah, I do like a lot of what happens in between. But as I said, I'll kind of nitpick maybe towards the end in my actual review. But overall, definitely overwhelmingly positive on this film. I know you're a big fan of this one.
Yeah, the first time around I gave it 4.5 stars. I was just blown away by kind of the more mundane aspects. Like, it really gets into the mundanity of what this work would be. By the way, John le Carré, I'm sure everyone knows, but in case anyone doesn't know, he did work for MI5 and MI6 in and around this time period. He wrote some novels under pseudonyms even while he was working for the MI5 and MI6, which is crazy. Talking like about this kind of work, so it very much kind of deals with what life would actually have been like, as opposed to, like you said, the James Bond aspects of things. As far as the performances go, I really loved basically all of the performances. John le Carré's favourite performance was a guy called Cyril Cusack, who played Control, who played like basically Alec Leamas's boss, the guy who kind of sets up this whole mission undercover.
Cyril Cusack, a legend of the podcast, may I add.
What was he in?
He was in Puccin.
He was in Puccin. Oh my god.
He was in Puccin.
He was in
Cyril
Puccin.
Cusack, legend of
That
the
is
podcast.
crazy. He was
one
in
of
Puccin.
probably the only time in podcast history a cast member from Puccin will reappear on the podcast.
And like, it's a really good performance. Like, very like, you don't know what way he's playing it. Is he on the good side? Is he on the bad side? Richard Burton's great as Alec Leamas. This is like a kind of against type kind of performance for what he was kind of doing at the time. It's much more reserved and obviously like quiet and ponderous, if you want to call it that. He didn't really get on with Martin Ray. It wasn't a secret. One of the reasons for this was that the guy who plays, or the girl who plays his love interest in this film, Claire Bloom, he had been in a relationship with years previously. So when he found out that she was cast, he wasn't too happy about it. But Martin Rick kind of put his foot down and said, "Look, this is my cast choice." So they didn't really get along, according to John le Carré. But I think a lot of people would say that the fact that he maybe looks quite pissed off might actually kind of work.
Throughout the whole film,
very
that guy
pissed
has a
off,
scowl on his face.
Yeah, like the fact that he probably wasn't doing much acting, let's put it that way. But he was Oscar nominated for this film, and in my opinion, very much deserved. I did really love Oscar Werner's performance as Fiedler as well,
Yeah.
and Peter Van Eyck's performance as Munt, the guy who's kind of, yeah, it's obviously kind of what the whole film is revolving around. Is he an MI5 undercover agent, or is he being framed by Fiedler, etc., etc. So, yeah, I think unless you have anything else, we'll kind of get into the nuts and bolts of the film, the play-by-play.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to just get straight into it, to be honest, yeah.
So as the credits roll, we see like a bunch of chicken wire. So it turns out we're at the American sector in Berlin, obviously very much in the thick of the Cold War. We see some guards keeping watch, very, very dark lighting, very like moody, almost noirish at times. Then a car pulls up. We see Alec Leamas kind of in an office den, played by Richard Burton. He seems to be waiting on someone, and he starts talking to another agent who was like basically saying you should just go home. He's not going to turn up, and he's like, he's going to turn up. He's going to turn up. You can go if you want, but I'm staying. The person he's waiting on goes by the name of Remick. So Munt is after him. It turns out this guy called Munt, who is on the East German side. He's
somewhat prominent character in this film, shall we say?
Somewhat prominent character. Yeah, we'll get into Munt, but Leamas then wanders through the streets, hoping that he'll show, and then all of a sudden a guy with a bicycle starts walking through the checkpoints, just kind of casually. No one's really paying too much attention to him. Is it Remick? Is it not Remick? And then sirens go off. The guy tries to get on his bike and just get the hell out of there. But he is shot dead. So
yeah,
we don't know who this person is, but obviously, yeah, it hasn't really gone to plan for Alec Leamas at this point. And then we see a guy called Pawson from personnel who's giving Leamas a ride to headquarters, MI5 headquarters. He says Control wants to see you. At this point, I thought Control was like kind of a team,
I thought it was like a
of
team
people.
or something. Yeah.
But obviously, it's just his code name, Control. So he meets with Control in his office, played by Cyril Cusack. They seem to believe that Munt has found and captured and or killed this guy Remick, so it hasn't really gone to plan, like I said, for Alec Leamas. And then Control says, look, why don't you move over to banking? And Alec Leamas is not too happy about this whatsoever. He's like, no, I'm a field agent. I want to be a field agent. And Control says, well, that's good, because I actually was just testing you, basically. I just wanted to see what...
He says, I actually want to keep you out in the cold, which is a great line.
Cracking line, yeah.
Basically saying, I actually want to keep you out in the line of duty, so to speak. And he asks him what he thinks of Munt, and he just says,
he's a bastard.
Yeah. But yeah, Cyril Cusack's character Control, basically, as you said, pushes a lot of buttons. It's interesting, their relationship throughout the film is really interesting, because what you see isn't necessarily what you get with almost any of their interactions. There's always underlying motives and stuff between the two of them, even though they are on the same side, so to speak. But yeah, basically, in the meantime, because these agents, well, you know, in between missions, they gotta do the... When I say the dirty work, I mean the boring work.
Yeah.
He basically has to be a member of society, a not so functioning member of society. So he goes to the job centre, he kicks off a big fuss, he gets a job as an assistant in a local library, where he meets a woman called Nan. And he doesn't really talk to her much to begin with, but basically she's the other assistant in this library. And to begin with, it seems as though he's an alcoholic who has no control over his life in between missions, and it's kind of hard to tell at this point why it is that he actually is even in this library. Like, you could argue it's like, oh, do agents not get paid in between jobs? But it's revealed later that this is actually all, as I said, part of this underlying plan.
Yeah, by the way, come back to that Munt conversation. I love how it's so effective at kind of setting up Munt as this like ultimate adversary, this like hyper intelligent, hyper calculating person who obviously they're fighting against. So I love how I think it's really effective writing. It's really, really smart writing there. So obviously, like you said, Alec and Nan are kind of getting to know each other a little bit, and he's playing the role of disheveled kind of just about keeping it together former maybe agent. She says, look, come to my house for dinner tonight. So he does, and they're getting to know each other, and she reveals that she's a communist. Alec then laughs, and he's quite rude to her actually. He just kind of dismisses her and says,
Yeah.
Almost makes it out like she's a child for thinking these things. But then he says, look, obviously there's innocent victims on both sides. It's not like there's a good side and a bad side. It's just, it's a matter of ideology. They do kiss before he leaves, and then when he leaves, he goes to the grocery store looking quite drunk and abrupt, and he starts acting rude. And he had talked to a grocery store owner a little just before the dinner. When he goes
Yeah.
back, turns out he might owe him a little bit of money on account. So he hits the grocery store owner, and we flash forward to sometime later. I don't think it's explicitly said how long, but maybe a few months or so.
Yeah, it's an indiscriminate amount of time later.
It's
But
not,
yeah, he's gone
not
to
that
prison
long,
basically for assaulting this shopkeeper.
yeah. Nan does pick him up. She does go to greet him outside the prison as he's getting out. So it seems that they've kind of continued their little romance while he's been inside.
She's made an effort to like tidy up his life outside of prison as well. She's taken all his stuff and kind of kept it in her apartment, and she said she has dinner cooked for him at 8 o'clock that night.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, I have to go back to work and all, but I'll see you at 8.
Yeah. So Alec then wanders around the park for the day, and he's sitting on a bench, and a guy comes over, introduces himself as Mr. Ash, although whether that's his real name or not, who knows. He says, look, I just want to buy a drink and lunch. Just want to kind of introduce myself, tell you about my organisation. So Alec kind of plays along and says, yeah, all right, whatever, but I need to be back. I have an appointment at 8 o'clock tonight, so I need to be kind of back for then. So they go to like a pub or a restaurant anyway, and they start having a meal, and he wants Alec to give him info on background, basically seemingly innocent kind of bureaucratic stuff, nothing kind of too kind of salacious or anything like that. And then he's like, okay, look, we'll meet tomorrow evening. Yeah, we'll meet tomorrow evening, and yeah, I'll tell you kind of what I know then. So he starts to hail.
Yeah, no, he actually says that he wants to meet him for a drink at 7:30 that night.
Yeah, that's right.
And he's like, oh, actually, I have a date at 8 o'clock, so that won't work.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, well, I can pay you for the meeting. And straight away he's like, oh, right, okay, I'll see you at 7:30.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So he starts to hail a cab. He starts to do things that maybe look a little bit odd, off-putting. Like he goes to a phone booth, doesn't really know who's ringing. And he hails a cab, and he goes to a house in Chelsea. When he goes inside, a guy called George Smiley opens the door. Anyone who knows Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy in the whole series will know, obviously, George Smiley is a very famous kind of John le Carré character. Probably his most famous, to be honest. He's there, George Smiley, and Control is also there, and he reveals, by way of exposition, that the attack on the grocer was very much planned, that this was all part of the plan. Because what they're trying to do is bait Munt into tempting Alec into basically turning on MI5. So the whole plan was for Alec to start drinking a lot more, start acting a lot more boorish and kind of stuff like this. So, and then basically the East Germans would kind of keep tabs on him and would make it look like they have something to offer. So yeah, that's the whole plan.
Yeah. Make it look like he's been cast aside by MI5 and MI6, and that he's not being looked after, and that he's taking it out on society, so that they think that they can then swoop in on an impressionable agent who might defect.
Yeah, and they also say that a guy called Fiedler is Munt's number 2. They say that he's the key to the plan because he hates Munt. He's Jewish, so Munt, we learn a little bit later, Munt was in the Hitler Youth. So yeah, he's not the most respectable of characters. But Fiedler is like, apparently Fiedler has all guns blazing for Munt. So if they can kind of persuade Fiedler that he is willing to defect, then that's the key to the plan. And then he's going to turn on Munt. That's the plan anyway.
Yeah, and he then goes to the bar where he meets Ash and another character called Dick, who is Cornelius Fudge from Harry Potter. And basically he starts berating Ash again, and Ash is like, oh, I won't take it in front of this guy, like, you can slag me in private but you can't slag me in public. And this guy Dick is like, actually, Ash, do leave, the grown-ups need to have a conversation here.
Yeah, very
and
dismissive.
he basically, again, we kind of figure out throughout this film that these meetings that Leamas is having is he's basically it's almost like a series of job interviews to be a defective spy, where he's working his way up the ladder of like officials, and now he's met this new guy, Dick, who's like, oh, funnily enough, I work in Intel, and I have people in Paris or whatever, and they gather certain kinds of information, and if that's the kind of information that you're interested in, there's a flight in it for you to the Netherlands tomorrow morning. I can arrange for all your stuff to be picked up if it is the kind of the kind of business that you'd be interested in dealing, because we pay a lot of money for information, shall we say. And originally, and as well to talk about when they were in the house in Chelsea, again, Alec is like, okay, no problem, but I don't want you to pick my stuff up because I don't want Nan to be involved. At the same time, Cyril Cusack's character Control in that house was like, oh, financially we'll take care of Nan whilst you're gone. And he's like, no, don't. I don't want any files or anything on her. Just keep her separate to all this. And again, he's just like, no, I'll pick up my own stuff. Don't worry. I'll meet you at the airport or whatever. But I don't want any implications on her. So I'll just grab the stuff myself. So he does go back home. Again, the score in that scene was great. And there's another scene later where the score is really good. But he goes back to Nan's place and basically says in so many words, I'm going to disappear for a little while, but I will be back. Don't take it as a bad sign or anything. You just won't see a lot of me for a while. I need to grab my suitcase. And they kiss, and then the next morning he heads off to the Netherlands, where he is greeted by an agent, Peters. He's also told that he's only got 18 days until his passport expires.
Because he's traveling on a false passport by the name of Mr. Twite. So
yes.
he's kind of has to do his business, get all the information out that he needs to, and then get back within this next 18 days. Otherwise,
not very covert of them though. Like, why would I? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I love the idea. I'm sure the idea was like as an excuse to get him in and out, that he can say, "Oh, my passport's expiring. I need to get home." But I love the idea that it's actually just like some guy who's like in the fake IDs department at MI5 who did a typo and put the wrong number in. He's like, "Oh fuck, this expires like instantly. Oh, I'm so sorry." And it's like, no, we've already sent him to the Netherlands, pal. Yeah. I'm sure it'll be fine.
It wouldn't actually be the East Germans who would have sought the passport from, because he's gone over to meet them, and I think it would have been. So anyway, he then meets this agent or whatever, starts to give some initial background info, date of birth, parents, date of recruitment, and then he says that his career started and ended in banking. Bastards. Mm-hmm. So it's a word that pops up a few times from Leamas. So he and this guy called Peters, they walk on the beach, and he then starts to give some proper info about kind of the duties that he undertook. So he said that he signed checks to unnamed agents, and then he mentions this thing called Operation Rolling Stone, which involved clandestine payments to a bunch of agents from Control that he was involved in. And then Peters gets an envelope, and there's a newspaper, which it turns out, for some reason, Alec being in the Netherlands, he's basically wanted by police in England. They found out that he's in the Netherlands and he can't go back home, basically, because for some reason, we don't know who, have leaked the fact that he is in the Netherlands. And obviously people are putting two and two together, because if he's in the Netherlands, there's probably only one thing he's going to be doing there as an MI5 agent. So Alec looks spooked. I don't think this was part of the plan.
No.
Spooked, by the way. Do you get that? Anyway, Peters says the Holland is not safe for Alec and we must go east. And Alec is like, you've leaked it. Obviously, like, this was just an entire plan from you to get me to go east. Where obviously, where I don't really have a say in the matter. And then he asks for his money, but Peters is like, you haven't given me any proper information yet, any actionable intel. So we can't pay you until you actually give us what we want. So he says, look, you're free to go. We're not going to hold you, but you will be caught in 48 hours. And, like, you'll go to jail for being a defector. So, well, it's completely up to you.
Yeah. So, after this news is leaked, we see that George Smiley actually visits Nan's apartment. And he just says, like, oh, hey, that's after the missing person report has gone out on him. And it's like, oh, I'm a friend of Alex. I just want to come in and talk. And she's like, okay. And that's kind of all we see of that scene. But then we go back and And we go back and Peters is driving Alec to East Germany behind the Iron Curtain, where he is going to a big old house where a certain Jewish member of the opposition resides. And yeah, again, when he gets to this big house, the score is so good when he gets out of the car and he walks up to his room, and it's almost like he's like being served to them, because this is the last we see of Peters. It's like as soon as he gets him to this door, Peters just disappears, and now he's in a whole new world where, yeah. Well, let's just say that the level of risk in this job has just gone up like tenfold.
I do love though how this unnamed person who we don't know yet, kind of similar to what Dick did with the other guy in the restaurant. He just pulls rank on Peters and he just starts putting him down, and he just dismisses him like, leave this to the grown ups. This is up to the grown ups now. So it's quite seems quite like hierarchical. The communism, maybe this whole. But anyway, the next morning, the same guy meets Alec at breakfast, and it turns out it's Fiedler. So that was him all along. They start to have a meeting where he does say that Munt was a member of the Hitler Youth. Alec then criticises him for breaking his word, but the man then says, look, you're the one being a traitor here. You're the one willing to sell out your country for money.
You're the lowest form of currency in the Cold War.
And I love how that they do have like ideological kind of battles like a few times. I will say Alec isn't necessarily like pro capitalism or whatever you want to call it.
He's not really pro anything. He says he doesn't really have any beliefs. He believes that the bus will get him to work. That's like, about it.
The entire reason he even just got into MI5 is just because he saw an ad in the paper and he's like, oh, that seems like something I could do. It's not because of any ideological kind of belief system that he has, whereas for Fiedler this is completely unacceptable. Like he'd almost respect it more if he was completely at odds with him. But like he's like, you have to believe in something. Like you can't just walk through life not kind of having this belief system. Anyway, he says, look, we didn't leak the story, so it wasn't us. Like the whole point was we think we were all set up to kind of work with you again. If you had given us some good info, we were like, we might want to use it again, so why would we leak it? And at this point the penny drops for Alex, and I think he then realises, actually, I've been set up by my own people here. Like they obviously leaked it because without telling me. So he starts to. I do love how Richard Burton plays these moments where you just see the kind of just the realization dawning on his face. So he doesn't really know. He just knows it's in over his head, and he doesn't really know how to play it at this point. Then Fiedler says, "Look, we'll give you your money when you've given us actual intel." But then Fiedler they're talking about Operation Rolling Stone, and Fiedler then says, Control ran Operation Rolling Stone himself, and he starts to deduce this info. Very clever guy. I think he's very like methodical and very, very, very good at reading into like stuff, whether that's intentional or not, who knows. Because there's an alias, by the way, the guy who picked up the money wasn't a German name. They're able to deduce that it's not going to be an English agent or an MI5 agent, because you're not going to have an English agent pick it up under a German name. It just wouldn't make any sense. So it must have been a defector from the East German side. And Fiedler then starts to wonder, could it have been Munt? And Alec is just apoplectic at this suggestion. He's like, it wasn't Munt. Like, I ran the whole operation. It could not have been Munt. He's clearly not lying. He clearly is just telling him the truth.
Yeah.
It wasn't Munt. It wasn't Munt. I would have known if it was Munt. So I love kind of how then it's Alec doesn't really know what's going on, but he's just really smart.
Yeah,
stuff.
he basically he's keeping Fiedler on a string, and he's like, listen, I know who all the agents were in Berlin who we had, and Munt wasn't one of them. Like the chances of it being Munt being, and it was just like a clerical error that I didn't find out, are like zero. Like there is no way that Munt was an agent and that I wasn't told about it. Again, as you said, which is the truth, he knew that the last defecting agent was that guy who got shot on the bridge on the bicycle. That, as far as he's aware, that is the last defective agent that they actually had. So when he's suggesting this one, he's like, no, it actually isn't. And Fiedler takes him to his room and he's like, listen, we'll give you a bit of a break. We'll go for a walk or whatever in the morning. But in the meantime, we have services and stuff for you here. And he's like, oh, are you talking about like women? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, oh, I don't need that. And he's like, oh, we know about your girlfriend at home from the library. And it's like, oh, so these people have been watching. What else do they know?
Yeah. That's when then they go on the walk in the mountains and they get into the whole ideological debate. But afterwards, then Fiedler is honest with Alec. He says, look, I can't say when you'll get your money because the info does need to be checked. And then he says, look, I need some signatures and a bunch of documents just from your alias, just so that kind of so that we can actually check this info properly. And the whole thing is they want to know when Rolling Stone withdrew the money from Copenhagen and Helsinki. So there's two payments that are basically key to this whole debacle, and they need to know when and who withdrew that money. So we cut down to Nan, who was chatting to a guy called Lofthouse, who was Alex's replacement at the library. And she then goes to her boss and she says, look, can I take my holiday now? I'm after being invited to Germany on behalf of the Communist Party. Well, she's pretty open as a communist, like she's not hiding or anything. To Leipzig, which is obviously behind the curtain. And her boss says, look, I don't judge you for obviously your politics, so just as long as you kind of keep yourself safe, off they go. So we cut back to Fiedler, he's on a payphone, and then he comes out on a payphone and he says to Alec, some news for you. It turns out that the dates of the payments from Copenhagen and Helsinki coincide directly with the dates that Munt was in Copenhagen and Helsinki. So it's Munt. Munt is the traitor. Munt was a defector all along. And Alec, again, is just absolutely insistent that that's not the case, but Fiedler is pretty convinced.
Yeah, he basically just starts toying with Fiedler, but then whenever they return back to this big house, there's people there waiting for Fiedler, and they get out of the car and they say to Fiedler that they need to have a serious conversation with him. And Fiedler says to Alec, "All right, Alec, you just go up to your room." So these guys kind of walk Fiedler off screen in one direction, and Alec goes in the other direction to his room. And he goes in, and there's a guard waiting there. Oh, it's just some indiscriminate guard. Because then in comes Munt.
Yeah.
And Munt just pistol whips him, knocks him out cold, and he wakes up then the next day, or a certain amount of time later, but I would assume the next day.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's got a big gash on his head. He's in chains. He's in a cellar. And Munt comes down to him with his henchmen, and he tells him to unlock his chains, and they drag Alec up to Munt's office, where Munt starts to interrogate him, and he basically says, "We know about your taxi journey after your lunch with Ash to George Smiley's house in Chelsea." And it's like, oh fuck, whatever mind games Alec has been playing with Fiedler, it's all going to come out now. He's fucked.
Yeah.
And Munt is like, we know that you drunkenly got in the taxi after lunch. We know you paid the taxi man. We know you went to George Smiley's house in Chelsea. What did you talk about? Because we know that you flew the following morning. And he's like, oh, I know George Smiley, but I don't know him personally. And they're like, no, we know that you went to his house. Like, no. I do know who you're talking about, but I've never met the guy. And then they're like, Alec, don't fuck around here. We know. And then Fiedler bursts in with his henchmen, and they're like, Munt, you're under arrest. Holy plot twist. Fiedler comes in and essentially, for now, saves Alec. Because, yeah, there's about to be a tribunal, and it's Fiedler versus Munt. Because Fiedler is convinced that Munt is a rat, because he has all this information on him now, whereas Munt pretty much actually knows what is happening. He actually knows the truth of the matter. Which is that, Alec is the fake defector.
Yeah. So the courtroom is assembled and something called the Presidium is underway. Fiedler starts giving evidence as to Alex. So he's talking about Alex's continued insistence that Munt couldn't have been a double agent. And he's then talking about this proves that he is the double agent because he's not going to give it away. He then says that Munt escaped Britain when he was kind of just a young officer. He escaped Britain years ago because he was a double agent. So apparently Munt is this kind of legend in communism circles, because he kind of managed to evade in pretty much.
Yeah, I think he was like on trial for murder or something, and he somehow managed to escape Britain.
Like basically everything was on lockdown: trains, ports, airplanes, and somehow he got out of there. And Fiedler's like, look, he was kind of hailed as a hero, but the only logical explanation is he turned and they let him go on his way because
he struck a deal with them.
Info back. Alec then is called to the stand, so then he starts to give information saying there's no way Munt, once again, he just pretty on brand, on message. There's no way he was kind of the defector. He calls it an administrative impossibility. Fiedler then starts to show how Control was secretly working Remake, because Alec's whole thing was he ran all the defectors, all the double agents. But Fiedler's able to show, look, Control was directly working with Remake, so that kind of blows your whole theory out of water, because clearly Control had contact with Remake that you didn't know about. So if he had control with Remake, then he obviously had control with other agents as well. And he said that Munt killed Remake because that way Fiedler couldn't then figure out that Munt was a double agent.
Yeah, he didn't get time to interrogate him.
Yeah.
And yeah, now Fiedler is incensed, and he is convinced that Munt is this British double agent, and then it's Munt's defense who stands up.
Do you know who's played by?
He basically
played by George Voskovic, who plays. Do you know who he plays? He's been on the podcast before. He plays.
He wasn't the guy from Foreign Correspondent, was he?
No, he plays juror number 11 from 12 Angry Men.
Does he?
The immigrant character.
Oh.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, good for him.
Didn't see that coming. But yeah, so he basically says that the whole defense of Alec, it's a lie. We have proof. We know that you met with the renowned British agent George Smiley, that you were friends before you came here. Tell us what you were talking about with George Smiley before you flew here, because if you're defecting, you wouldn't have been in George Smiley's house beforehand. We know that you're pretending to be a secret double agent. And he's like, I don't have friends. And he's like, we know you're friends with George Smiley. And he's like, I'm telling you what I told you before. I don't have friends. And then they were like, okay. And you were saying as well that you've no money, and this is also like that you're financially motivated to switch sides. How did you manage to pay your taxi fee? He's like, oh, I had loose change in my pocket. And they were like, oh, so you were that broke that all you had was the loose change in your pocket. Right, okay. We're going to call a witness.
Yeah.
And yeah, the communism fun trip to Leipzig for Nan. Yeah, no, she's on the stand. She's on the stand at this tribunal. That was her trip.
So she obviously, once she sees Alec, she starts flipping out and she starts just kind of spiraling. Yeah. She obviously doesn't want to answer, kind of give the incorrect answer, because she cares for Alex. She doesn't want to put him in a bad spot.
And they tell her as well to get the absolute truth out of her. She's not to be given any context to this tribunal. They're just going to ask her questions and she has to answer them truthfully. She's not getting any context as to why they're asking her these questions.
Yeah, so she decides to kind of give all the information she can, because she doesn't really know if she lies what kind of that will do to Alec. So she's like, right, I might as well just tell the truth. So she's asked about the lease, because someone paid her lease for £1,000 and sent it to her anonymously, which obviously is quite the red flag, quite an interesting little wrinkle.
Yeah.
She said she thought it might have been Alec, or a friend of Alec, and this guy, Carden, who's Munt's attorney, is like, so if it was Alec, then he obviously isn't broke. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And Alec then, Carden then says to Nan, did someone that Alec knows get in touch with you? And she's initially kind of hesitant, and she's like, yeah, he did, but I don't know his name. And then eventually then she's like, yeah, his name was George Smiley, and he said that he was going to help me. So Fiedler looks shocked. Fiedler is like, yeah, he doesn't know what way to take that. Alec then gets up and he's like, okay, I admit it, because he obviously wants to kind of save Nan's skin. He says they counted on Fiedler's hatred of Munt. Fiedler then rants and says, look, this actually proves that he's not a double agent, but he's trying to save Munt because he knows we're onto him. So I love how it's like, you really could look at it either direction and make it a really strong case for either side actually being right here. Munt, he said, look, Munt is obviously London's man, and he's just trying to save their skin now because he knows we're onto him. But the court, the tribunal, then kind of makes the decision. They say, Fiedler, you're being remanded in custody. Munt, you're reinstated to your previous position. And Alec and Nan, you guys are arrested. So seems not to be a happy ending for Alec and Nan here.
Yeah, they're brought to a cell, and then the door to the cell opens. And Alec heads out, and then all of a sudden he's able to get outside, and he heads outside after being put in prison, and Munt is waiting for him. Because, holy fucking shit, Munt is a British agent.
Fiedler was
Yes.
right all along.
Yes, Fiedler was right all along. And initially, Alec is like, "Why are you doing this or whatever?" And Munt is like, because all they're going to see is a few open doors and a missing car. It's a pretty easy conspiracy to pin on Fiedler's friends that they tried to do it to try and help you guys. Basically, to eliminate all of Fiedler's allies so that Munt reigns supreme. But yeah, Alec deduces that he's actually also helping him because he is, in fact, a British agent. A British agent who has killed lots of innocent people and has done lots of heinous acts, but he is a British agent nonetheless. And Alec gets in the car, the getaway car, where he's told he's going to meet this young guy at the wall. The guy's going to give him the signal as to when to go, and then him and Nan have to scale the wall. They cannot stop. They have to scale the wall, get over, and once they're over, they're safe. So they start driving, and yeah, Nan's basically like, "Why did he let us go? What's happening? Please give me some context to this situation."
Richard Burton is amazing in this scene, by the way. This is like probably
Yeah,
where he
this
really
is his
earned
big
that.
monologue.
Yeah, so he goes on this whole like rant, or it's almost like a confession, and it's almost like a diatribe. It works on a whole bunch of levels, but basically,
Being a spy isn't cool.
no, like the whole thing. Yeah, exactly. Like he realizes that maybe he wasn't working for the good guys all along. Not that there's necessarily a good or a bad side, but you know what I mean. You're in this kind
There's
of line
villains
of work.
on both sides.
Yeah, exactly. Like so, he starts. He says Fiedler worked out the truth. So what you've seen here is a whole dirty plot to kill the Jew. He calls it a plot to rehabilitate Munt's image because Munt was starting to be suspected by Fiedler and a few others. So he says, "Look, we were both used. We were both just pawns in this ugly game." Like, just an amazing monologue, basically. Yeah, and then the young agent then starts to give them advice. So they get to the wall, and we see a big spotlight. Great sequence. So they avoid the spotlight and they start climbing up the wall, but then it looks like they're spotted. George Smiley on the other side is saying to Alec, just jump. But they shoot Nan. Alec doesn't know whether to go jump over on the other side or go down to help Nan. Makes a split second decision. Tries to climb back down to help Nan, and he's shot. So very, very dark, somber, kind of tragic ending where
Yeah, they die in a ditch. The end.
it's like it's not a happy ending whatsoever. Let's put it that way. So yeah, that's the spy who came in from the cold. Harry, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, as I said, bleak as fuck ending, and I was so here for it. I thought it was a really powerful ending. I haven't read the book,
No, neither have I.
so to be honest, most of my main positives from the movie, I would assume, would be my main positives from the book as well. That's just how great the opening is, where we're basically thrown into the Cold War, which is essentially a lot of waiting around, a lot of doing fuck all, and then someone gets shot. That's basically what the Cold War was. And the ending as well, bleak, they die in a ditch. Being a spy is being a pawn. You're not a secret agent. It's not cool. You don't get
Yeah,
gadgets and stuff. You just get used to get information. Yeah, fantastic. I found a lot of the sequences and a lot of the people, as you said, ironically, in the hierarchy of the communist side. I found a lot of them to be quite forgettable until we get to Fiedler and
yeah, I agree with that.
Munt.
Yeah,
Uh, any of the scenes with like Cornelius Fudge or Ash or Peters, the whole time I was kind of like, I know the whole idea is that it's a bleak and, as you said, mundane but intentionally mundane look at the Cold War. But I've just felt as though because the characters of Fiedler and Munt stood out so much that they could have probably made, and this isn't a comment on the book, this is more so the performances. The actors themselves just didn't really do anything for me. So there was a good portion of this film where he's doing all these interviews and stuff before he gets to Fiedler, where I am kind of like, come on, man, get to the interesting people. I want to meet Fiedler. I want to meet Munt. I don't really care about Cornelius Fudge, you know. But that being said, overall, I think it is a very good spy thriller, and I feel like I think probably the best way to watch this, not that I did it this way, but is if you watch the Connery Bond films that were made beforehand, then you watch this.
Nice change of pace.
Exactly, it would just be a breath of fresh air, I would say. But because that's what it was at the time, so that would give you sort of the historical context of the film. It was a huge success as well, and
also shot
overall, yeah.
Sorry to cut you
Go
off. A lot of it was shot in Ireland, by the way, as well. In Ireland and the UK, but a lot of it was shot in Ireland. Some of it in Smithfield markets as well. So,
Cool.
yeah, it's pretty nice. There's a big commotion, by the way, over here when Elizabeth Taylor came over, because obviously she was with Richard Burton at the time, so she was like one of the biggest stars in the world. So yeah, that's what we're like. We're kind of star hungry we are over here.
Yeah.
But yeah, what was it?
Desperate for stars.
What's your star?
Anyway, yeah.
Speaking of stars, what's your star rating?
Speaking of stars, yeah, 3.5.
3.5.
Yeah, I think it's a very good film. It, as I said, I just felt as though maybe performances wise and just with the characters themselves, there is a bit of a chunk of this movie where I did kind of zone out, and I was just like, I don't care about these people who he's meeting. But then, because again, I actually haven't seen Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, believe it or not. Even though I know it's like a movie I would definitely love, I don't know why I haven't seen it. It's just one of them ones I haven't gotten to yet. But like, I didn't even know who George Smiley was, for instance. So yeah, when we get to Fiedler, I'm like, now we're cooking. And as I said, the beginning, like the first 5 minutes and the very end is like exceptional, really, really good, and the score is very good. Yeah. It's kind of used minimally, but when it's used, it's very good. What about you?
Yeah, so I've read a bunch of John le Carré novels. I haven't actually read this one. And you just mentioned Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy there. I actually wasn't a big fan of that, the most recent kind of adaptation of that. I don't know why. I remember watching it like not too long after it came out. I was only a teenager at the time, to be fair. Wasn't that impressed by it, and then I was like, look, maybe it's my age. So I remember watching it more recently, probably like a couple of years ago, and just didn't really like it that much either. I thought it was a bit bland. So I did kind of have a feeling going into this most recent rewatch for this podcast that I was like, is it actually going to hold up? But it does, for me anyway. I gave it 4.5 the first time around, and I stuck with that this time around. I just think it's very, I think it's a lovely, like a really nice change of pace. I mean, lovely, it's not lovely at all, but you get what I'm saying. It's a nice change of pace as opposed to the kind of spy thrillers, the way the direction that spy thrillers have gone in at this point in time, kind of in the 60s, like you said, the Bond films, and then stuff like that as well. John le Carré, the novels I have read, I've really liked. I love The Night Manager, actually, if the limited series. Well, I say limited series, they're bringing it back for season 2, so it's not limited series anymore. But from a few years ago, the Tom Hiddleston one with Hugh Laurie and Olivia Colman, that's great. I really recommend that. So look, I am a big fan of John le Carré, the stuff that I've seen, most of them anyway. And I really love this. I love Richard Burton's performance. I actually really I thought the cinematography, like it's very like kind of intentionally dull, but I still think, considering how many, like there is one scene at the beach and in the mountains, so they're trying to do as much as they can to make it look a bit more attractive. But even the scenes where it's just two guys in a room talking, I actually thought they were shot really well. It's like for me anyway, I thought there's like a pace to them that you don't usually always get. So as much as it does kind of want to highlight the mundanity of this real work that obviously John le Carré is kind of, I mean, not to this level, but he was kind of involved in. I still think it's a really effective kind of espionage thriller, and like I said, nice change of pace for the podcast as well. I think, yes, do you want to introduce next week's episode and the next arc as well that we have, actually, by the way, Harry?
Yeah, I will, of course, and then I reckon we'll talk about what we've watched recently as well, because we're plenty of time. But yeah, next arc on the podcast is I haven't come up with a name for it yet, so we'll come up with a name right now, because normally I do the graphics for each arc like a month in advance, but I haven't done it yet. I reckon we call it Romance at the Movies. How about that?
Yeah, I'm cool with that. Yeah.
Romance at the Movies. Yes, it is the month of February. We're going to go a little bit more romantic on the podcast, cover some actors and in particular actresses who we haven't covered yet. And first up, funnily enough, is an actor and an actress we have covered before.
And
It's
a
Casablanca.
And a director.
It's and all the side characters.
Just so
Fucking
many.
the Conrad fight. Yeah, like this
Peter Lorre,
filled
Sidney
with people.
Greenstreet,
Yeah.
Claude
Filled
Rains,
with
Claude
people who
Rains.
talked about it. Literally.
Yeah.
This film is stacked with people and
stacked.
a director who have already been on the podcast. Obviously, Bogey and Bergman. Very much looking forward to Casablanca. And check out our Instagram and stuff to kind of keep up to date with the following episodes. We do obviously announce them at the end, but it's a quicker way, I think, to maybe get up to date with what's coming up. But yeah, as far as what we've watched recently, I feel like, so I don't know if you saw, but for Christmas I got a projector.
Oh, I didn't see that. Nice.
Yeah, been watching some movies on my projector. Feels cool. But I watched The Pianist, which I had never seen before. I watched it because I'm gonna probably obviously see The Brutalist as soon as I can, and I don't know how I'd never seen The Pianist before.
I've never seen it.
It's fucking bleak, but it is amazing. I know that like in the early 2000s when it came out, a lot of people who survived the Holocaust saw it in the cinema and said it's like the most accurate depiction of the Holocaust that they'd ever seen. Obviously, fuck you, Roman Polanski, but can't help it. Film's amazing.
Yeah,
Adrian Brody is so good in it.
He's a great director.
So
like,
good in it.
He's a piece of fucking shit, but he's a great director. Like, it is.
It's so annoying.
Bad people can make good art.
Yeah, you got to separate the art from the artist sometimes. I also finally watched my first Greg Araki film because I saw Criterion are releasing a Greg Araki box set, and I was like, right, well, before I haven't bought it or anything, but before I commit to potentially buying it, let me check out Nowhere because it's on the Criterion channel. Mysterious Skin wasn't there. Oh my God, what a film, what an experience. Like one of them films, and the film I watched after is also just a full body experience. It's so interesting. I gave it 4 stars. I could so see it going up on a rewatch because I didn't really know much about Greg. I obviously had heard of Greg Araki in his films and lots of his films, but I'd never seen any of them, and I didn't know what his style was. I just knew that he was a gay man who basically uses a lot of LGBTQ themes and undertones in his movies, and that they're visually very impressive, and that most of his films have like today's Hollywood stars, but back when they were teenagers. That's all I knew. Holy shit. There's fucking alien abductions. There's all sorts of crazy shit in this movie. It's insane. And again, another film that just feels like a full-on experience, which I gave 4.5 stars to, is Almost Famous. What a movie. Absolutely incredible.
Is that Cameron Crowe? Is that Cameron Crowe, is it?
Yes, it is indeed Cameron Crowe. I felt like I was in the 70s for 2 hours. All this film needed was Matthew McConaughey. It would have been perfect. No, it's so unbelievably amazing. I genuinely for 2 hours straight was like just in a different place. Like I was just like in a whole other world following this band, Stillwater, and absolutely incredible. I watched Alex Garland's Civil War.
I wasn't a big fan.
It could have been good.
Yeah.
It could have been good.
I rewatched
that.
Like sorry to cut across.
Yeah.
I watched that twice in the cinema, and first time I was like kind of enjoyed it to an extent. Then I went and rewatched it, expecting my rating to go up, but actually went down. I don't know. It's not nowhere near as hard hitting as it could have been.
Nah, it's fairly. I've seen a lot of people call it empty. It's like it's like a political commentary on.
I usually like Garland as well. I usually like a lot of his work. Like Devs. Devs is a limited series from a few years ago.
Very surface level.
Yeah.
Very surface level. But the idea of the film is really cool, and as I feel like most people's experience is, you're waiting to find out what Jesse Plemons' character is. He gets on screen, and then you're like, no, please, get away.
Oh, he's crazy. He's
you're waiting for him, and then as soon as he's there, it's like, holy shit, no. But he is incredible in his cameo.
He's amazing in everything, but he's great in that.
Yeah. And then, the last 2, I watched the Tale of Zatoichi. Basically, on TikTok, I discovered, this TikTok got a funny amount of views as well, so it may become a series. But I found that a guy played the same character in a series of 26 films across like 30 years in Japan called Zatoichi. It's this blind samurai who's this. Yeah, I really like the first one. I've only seen the first one so far, but there's 26 of them. Like Toshihiro Mifune plays Yojimbo in one of them, which is just gas. But yeah, basically, it's a really interesting film because his friend is basically a gang leader and is a terrible person, and you're kind of like, why is he hanging out with this guy? And it's just so interesting the route that the film goes down, because the opposition, the rival gang, also then hire a samurai, and the two of them just go fishing one day and become friends.
I love it.
And it's like, oh my god. And their bond is then basically the central focus of the film, is how the blind samurai, who is a former Yakuza member, and this other samurai who has been told that he has some sort of illness, but he doesn't know what it is, how they get on whilst basically the two gangs are just killing each other left, right, and center, waiting for each one to use their secret weapon when they both know that, like, oh, he's actually their secret weapon, but like, I'm sure he won't kill me. But then the ending, the huge fight scene between the two is class. It's so dramatic. It's fantastic. And yes, I will definitely be seeing the second one. And as I said, I'll probably be covering all 26 of them on TikTok, and I'll make a video on this channel as well. I probably will as well if I do end up finishing the entire series. And lastly, I watched Conclave, and it's very good. Conclave is very good.
Conclave is good.
Very
Very,
good film.
very camp. I love it. Basically,
What about you?
Bunch of messy bitches going for it.
Yeah, pretty much.
I haven't actually, because I was away over the weekend. Usually I kind of manage to get a few films watched over the weekend, but I was away over the weekend, so I didn't manage to this weekend, so not as much watched as usual. I watched Michael Mann's Miami Vice with Colin Farrell and Jamie
Still
Foxx.
haven't seen that.
I've seen it before. It's a rewatch. Yeah, no, I enjoy it. It's not like among Mann's best work, I don't think, but a lot of, like, Mann films in general look incredible. Like, they look so visually arresting. Colin Farrell got some stick for his performance, but like, it's a lot better than I kind of not even remember it, but it's a lot better than I think it's given credit for. I don't remember like thinking that much about it either direction on the first watch, but I kind of really enjoyed it actually. I have also watched Casablanca in advance. We were supposed to do that today, but obviously we're not able to. Anyway, I have seen Casablanca, and we'll talk about that next week. The only other film that I watched is the James Mangold, A Complete Unknown, obviously with Timothée Chalamet.
Yeah, I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. Like, I'm not a massive Bob Dylan super fan, but I do enjoy his music, and like, he's an incredible songwriter, if nothing else. And no, I think Chalamet does a very good job. I think Edward Norton does a very good job. I think Boyd Holbrook as Johnny Cash does a very good job. I love how he's Mangold's kind of muse. He just pops up in all Mangold films. He's great.
Such a good actor as well. Such an underrated actor. I wish he was
actor.
in more things.
Yeah, he's a phenomenal actor. But I love how Mangold uses him. Like, he's great in Logan. It's this kind of crazy, wild.
He was not that it's James Mangold, but he was great in Narcos as well.
He was great. Yeah, he was great in Narcos. He's great in. I don't think he was actually in Ford v Ferrari, which I could be wrong, but I don't think he was. That's Mangold. He was in Indiana Jones, the last Indiana Jones film, and he's good in that. So I think he's one of those actors that I always enjoy watching. As far as they're the only films that I've seen, but I'm kind of trying to get through Industry as well, which is obviously the HBO show about banking, but it's also about sex basically. Like, it's just about 4 sex scenes every episode. So if sex scenes are a thing, watch Industry. So no, it's a good show though. It's kind of like Billions, that show from a few years ago. It's kind of like Billions kind of meets, I'm not sure exactly, kind of Billions meets Game of Thrones or something. I'm not too sure. So yeah, that's what I've been watching recently. So I think we can pretty much wrap it up there unless you have anything else.
Well, actually, funnily enough, as we're recording this, I know this is coming out in like 2 weeks' time, but as we're recording this, I just released a video. I'll be focusing more so on physical media videos on the channel, and yeah, I just uploaded. I'm very, very lucky guy, very fortunate. Someone who watches the podcast, who I know, gave me their entire DVD collection.
Oh, wow.
So it was basically a mystery unboxing of what ones I already had. Bizarre lack of duplicates. I was very lucky in that regard as well. And yeah, I've added them all to the collection there. And I'm not sure. I don't think it'll be out yet because it's based on when stuff arrives. But I'm also my boutique Blu-ray / 4K collection. I've had a couple of bits arrive, but I'm gonna wait for everything that I ordered at the start of the month to come, and then I'll do one big update video as regards to that collection. But yeah, in the meantime, I'm not sure if I'll have anything else coming out short videos wise, but on my end anyway, yeah, that's probably the only physical media video, unless, as I said, those orders do come before this, in which case I'll record it and get the video out that evening or whatever. But yeah, physical media is kind of my thing for the rest. For the next year anyway, I'll be updating my boutique Blu-ray and 4K collection and keeping you all posted. So yeah, hope you enjoy those videos. And Shane, have you got anything in the pipeline?
I don't know. I'm struggling with a dose at the moment. No, I haven't even had time to think about that, to be honest. But I might try and see if I can get a Wolfman episode up.
Nice.
The original Wolfman and the new Wolfman. So if and when I can get to go and see that, I might work on that and just talk about the. I know the plot anyway is very different, kind of similar to what Lee Winnell did with The Invisible Man.
Yeah,
it's like a reimagining. So I might talk about kind of the differences and was he inspired by any kind of anything from the original. But yeah, and then I'll obviously talk about who did it better maybe. So if and when, I'm not making any promises, but if and when I can get to see that, I might get that done. Yeah.
Sweet.
Cool. Yeah, so that's episode 41
yeah.
of the Golden Hour Film Podcast.
And yeah, we'll see you all next week for Casablanca, which will be a big episode, I reckon. But yeah, thank you very much, everyone. And make sure to like the video, comment on the video what you thought of the movie, and comment as well what you want to see more of on the channel for the next year. Yeah. Because yeah, we've a fairly open playing field at the minute when it comes to videos and stuff. So yeah, let us know what you want to see. In the meantime, thank you very much. I've been Harry Bailey.
I've been Shane Maloney.
And that has been the Golden Hour Film Podcast, episode 41. The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. Goodbye.